My name is Catherine Phil MacCarthy, and I work mainly in the area of poetry, and I've also published a novel.
And I'm Yvonne Pettitt. I'm a visual artist, especially working oil on canvas, and have a background in art history. But I suppose, like all our backgrounds, it goes into childhood. I think when I grew up, I had no concept that you could be an artist. An artist was something that was slightly degenerate or hippie-ish. And so when I left school, I kind of fell into cooking and decided that definitely didn't want to spend my life doing that. So I went back to college and I did art history, archaeology, and had a family. And so it was a really nice balance for me. It was something cerebral, something from my brain to do. And art history was an amazing way into history. And I think that's pretty early on. I met Phil. We used to go around galleries. So we were always discussing early Irish women artists, for example. But I always wanted to paint, always. And suddenly you wake up gazillions of years later and think, I'm going to do that now. And here I am.
I think books, they were always really important in my life. And from the age of about 8 or 9, when the mobile library came into the school when I was a child in the country, and I would be found upstairs under the bed reading a book. And I think that sense of having another life and having an inner life, and writing depends on an inner life. So it started there for me, and then I guess it developed over the years.
Definitely, I think again, it goes back to childhood. Many of the things I absolutely remember in national school being taught how to draw a house, and just the sheer magic of it, and it stayed with me. And then I did nothing, because I went to quite a bourgeois sort of school where art was not encouraged, and that's very much part. I think it's a huge part of emergent middle class Ireland in the 60s and 70s, and I'm just really a part of that. When I went to university and started studying art history, it's just such an incredible way to get into history. And I don't know, it just brings so much richness to our lives. But I also love aesthetics. I love the whole thing about balance and harmony and color composition. So I love the whole complexity of visual art, and I love oil on canvas because it's romantic, but I love to be part of that old tradition that goes right back to the Renaissance. And there's just, as a medium, it has its own properties, but I feel that they suit me. So I absolutely, when I'm painting, I'm so happy, and I just think that's kind of like a human right to create. I think we can all do it. So I love all of the things that I used to talk about in art history. I sort of try to apply them to myself now.
There are many phases, I think, in a life, and early on, I guess Keats would have been the very first one, where I was in London as a student working for the summer, and I went to his house, to Keats' house, and I came across the letters to Fanny, and I was very struck. And obviously, I suppose he was on the Leaving Cert syllabus, and we had studied the poems, and there was a kind of heartbreak about the fact that he had died at 27, at the age of 27. And so as a figure, I think he was there. And but in life, I think that I was a drama student and I studied in London, and there was a poet, Gerard Benson, who ran a creative writing workshop, and he was very influential in being a very nurturing figure. And when I came back to Dublin, I thought, people in London think you can write because you're Irish. And I then joined a workshop that Yvonne Boland was running, and suddenly things got very real, and in the sense that the difficulty, I think Nuala O'Donnell has said one of the reasons she's a poet is that it's the most difficult thing one could possibly do. And I understand that now in a way, because there's the sense of actually taking it on at the time. But Yvonne Boland is an important influence for sure. And I then came across other work and other people, Seamus Heaney obviously as well.
I think that art is of its time. There are so many in different eras, but perhaps aesthetically, I really love plein air painters in preceding Impressionism. So those French painters, those American painters. I think today, I love many of the Irish women artists are absolutely amazing. Sometimes they're more traditional phases. What I'm finding is I'm quite a traditional in that way sort of painter. I love painting outside. I like a direct kind of response. There are just so many, and today in the contemporary world, I think that the teaching has become ubiquitous, and there are so many incredible artists alive today. So I belong to an artist network called ArtNet, DLR for Dún Laoghaire Down. It's supported by Dún Laoghaire Down. It's a network of artists, and every so often, every couple of years, they have an open submission, a call out to artists to collaborate and produce some kind of work that they try to exhibit. So that was about 3 years ago, and then COVID stopped play for quite a long time. So the latest call out 3 years ago was on the theme of metamorphosis. And since I know Phil and I know her work, and much of it concerns those transitions of change, personally, environmentally, in every way. And so I immediately thought, I'll ask Phil if she'd like to be my collaborative partner. So that's how we started.
We started with a conversation in Blackrock Park.
Yeah.
One morning, which was quite frosty, I think.
Walking around the pond.
Walking around the pond, exactly. And I guess the word metamorphosis, for me, it was Ovid. Immediately, the stories of Ovid, and lots of references of figures being transformed or transforming themselves. And I would start with a poem from Daughters of the House that was published by Daedalus Press. It's called Aostra and Hair. And Aostra as a figure is Easter. She's an old English goddess figure. And she comes, it's the story of rebirth. It's of the year dying and being reborn, and the female figure of Easter. Aostra and Hair. The second she tilts her head, removes sunglasses. I'm reminded of how close I came to a hare sitting tall in the headland dawn past Lissadell, motionless in long grass. Eyes of yellow amber, exposed, on the uphill of an oval profile, the span of a field in its gaze, sight, sound, speed, entire being tuned for escape.
That collaborative exhibition was finally staged a few months ago in Walter's pub in Dunleary that have given its walls to ArtNet DLR as an exhibition space. So that did happen, and then, but it was curtailed because it had been, so many different artists and they had moved on to do other different things. So I'm having an exhibition here in the Signal, and I thought it would be an ideal opportunity to show what we did in a different venue, so to speak. So when Phil sent me some poems, and basically I responded to them, which I found quite challenging, because normally I paint what I see. I like to go into the RHA school and I do life drawing and painting, paint plein air, and I paint still life. This was so different. And I'm not a graphic artist, and I don't really want to illustrate stories, and I'm not a surreal artist. So I found it really amazing, actually, amazing experience. So yeah, I really loved it, and so I that's what I did. Yeah, and she's written another one I've yet to respond to. So what's the next one?
So I think the Lost World of Volubilis is because we talked a lot about, we started talking for some reason about how the world was changing, and at the time I had read Dr. Zhivago, Pasternak's novel, which is, I hadn't quite realised all about how Russia had changed in 1917 and afterwards, and the figure. And I think we were both very aware that the world we're standing in was changing, but maybe not to the extent, because COVID hadn't happened and Russia hadn't been invaded, Ukraine hadn't been invaded by Russia at the time, so it was a different world. But that talk about colony and post-colony, I suppose, reminded me of a trip that I'd made with Justin, my husband, and we had gone to Morocco, and we went to a place called Volubilis, and there are Roman ruins there, and there are some terrific temples in Morocco and also in Sicily. I think that the best Greek temples are actually outside of Greece, but the Roman ruins as well. So this is the lost world of Volubilis. A pair of white storks have made their nest atop a Corinthian column. Pillarbox red legs and beak against a May blue sky. They guard stone ruins of this imperial outpost, the temple of Jupiter, and arches of the basilica, where once the Senate argued over costs of shipping grain to Rome and every city in between. Now, as then, they prey on snakes and field mice over a patchwork of greens. Olive groves, apple and cereal farms that stretch for miles to the foothills of the Atlas. People come and go at work all day in the fields, and down below, foreigners with cameras and guides pore over mosaics that depict a wild Eden, territory of elephant, antelope and lion, Orpheus and his lyre, the four seasons distinct, Diana and nymphs in the forest. Now as then, though no one knows where it began, locals say that storks protect us, bring luck, keep evil at bay, make the world new, and to a young couple yearning, ferry a baby.
It's a journey. Don't think of the end. Just enjoy the process, because that's the most important thing, actually, is being immersed and being able to focus on what you're actually doing. That is, and I know that when I do that, that's when I really do kind of think, yeah, I quite like that. That's when it happens, when you're really honest. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I second that. And it's making the time, creating a writing life, the everydayness, even if it's a small amount of time, and sometimes with small children in the house or other work that you have to do, but trying, keeping the connection, because that continuum is really important, and it's easier then to go back to the work. And I think having a few colleagues as well who are making work and linking with them and connecting.
It's so important. And just do it. Yeah.
I think so. I work at home in a study, and I think when you go there often, and if it's a place where the work happens, and we were talking about this earlier, if it's a kind of sacred space in a way,
yes.
An energy develops around it. I heard a very interesting comment, and it was Sebastian Barry, the playwright, and he was talking about his characters, and he was saying, I go down because he has a room in the basement of the house where he was writing, and he said, they're waiting for me every morning. And he was talking about the characters in a play, but there's something about your presence and being available to the work. And nobody is waiting for my poem, really, except myself. And if I'm not waiting for it, it can take a lifetime.
Sure.
And so it is a matter of just making oneself present and the energy and the time. I think when I read a poem, I hope that the person listening will be able to locate, that it won't be about me in particular, that the person will actually be able to locate themselves in it, and if it's an experience, and to recognize that and to find their own relation to it, and that it will also in some way increase their understanding or enrich their life.
Visually, I think the pieces I did for Metamorphosis have a much stronger narrative than my usual work. So it's just, sometimes they're slightly macabre. So it's to create an emotion, I think, to spark an emotion. That's what I'm hoping for.
And I think to raise awareness as well. I think that's certainly something that...
We did like doing the Daphne one, didn't we?
We did.
Daphne turning into a tree to escape rape and pillage and war.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yes.
Seeking refuge in nature.
Seeking refuge in nature, sorry, excuse me. Okay, here it is,
Good
Daphne.
stuff.
And the story in Ovid, the god is pursuing Daphne, and what she decides is in a way the poem speaks it. Daphne, now that it's spring and the blackbirds sing late in the evening, you'll find me high in the laurel tree, my face turned into leaves, hair streaming in the breeze, the full stretch of my limbs concealed in a mantle of foliage.
The exhibition is here in the Signal Art Centre, and the opening is Friday the 14th of October. Please, all welcome. Glass of vino on me. So I want to say a huge thank you to the Signal Art Gallery for giving us this opportunity and letting me join the Signal Art Society, it's been a huge stepping stone